Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Cosmic Bedtime. Tonight we ask a small, strange question, the kind that can only be answered once your eyes have already started to close. How can a single world be frozen and burning at the very same moment? How can one small planet hold both the harshest fire and the deepest ice without ever choosing between them? Tonight we find out that it doesn't have to choose. It simply stands there, patient and unmoving, on the doorstep between the two, and lets us learn that some contradictions are not problems to solve at all. They are just places to rest. We have 4 slow regions to drift through tonight, and you do not need to hold on to a single one of them. First, we arrive together above the small naked world that lives closest to the fire, hanging there in the dark, taking it in from a distance where nothing can touch us. Then we drift into the slowest sunrise there is, following Mercury's strange, unhurried clock, out toward the long, thin line where day finally leans into night. After that, we sink into a hidden quiet, down into shadowed craters that have never once felt warmth, and down further still, toward an iron heart that has been beating, low and steady, since before the Earth had oceans. And last, we settle among the patient watchers, the ordinary people across thousands of years who lifted their eyes from ordinary doorsteps and evening after evening came to know this small bright wanderer simply by watching and waiting and watching again. 4 regions, and you can let all 4 go, because I will carry them for you. There is nothing to remember, nothing to hold in place. You are only here to listen and to drift, and eventually to sleep. Before we go, if this kind of slow, quiet company is something you find yourself returning to, a like or a subscribe helps the channel reach others who are also lying awake tonight, somewhere out there, looking for a voice to make the dark feel a little less empty. But that is only if it feels easy. Nothing here asks anything of you, because there is nothing here to hold on to, no list to keep, no fact to remember for later, no thread to follow with any effort at all, just a voice, low and even, moving through the dark alongside you. Let your shoulders ease down into whatever is beneath you now. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands go loose and heavy, however they happen to be resting. Feel the weight of your own body settling a little further with every breath you let go of. There is nowhere else to be tonight, and nothing else to do. Settle in. Let the night begin the way all far journeys begin here, with your breath easing out, your body sinking a little deeper into whatever is holding you, and the ceiling above you dissolving into something wider than any ceiling was ever meant to hold. There is nowhere to be. There is nothing to solve. You are simply lifting, the way a held breath lifts on its own once you stop minding it, up past the last familiar light, past the hush of your own street, until the earth itself becomes only one more small lamp glowing behind your shoulder. And ahead of you, closer to the sun than any other world dares to circle, a tiny sphere is turning in silence, gray and pitted and old beyond telling, and it is waiting for you the way a doorstep waits, patient, unmoving, entirely unbothered by how long it takes you to arrive. There is no ship carrying you, no engine, no sound at all beyond the low hush of your own pulse. You are simply present, the way you are present in the last moment before a dream fully forms, drifting closer to that gray curve of a world without ever quite arriving, without ever needing to arrive. Mercury turns beneath you at its own unhurried pace, indifferent to your watching. And the closer you drift, the more its 2 faces begin to separate in your vision, one bright as a coal at the center of a fire, one dark as the inside of a closed hand. This is Mercury, the nearest planet to our star, so near that its days should, by every simple guess, be a single unbroken furnace from horizon to horizon. And in a way they are. Where sunlight lands directly on that ancient rock, the surface climbs toward 430 degrees Celsius, hot enough that certain metals would run liquid across the ground, hot enough that the very idea of touch dissolves into something closer to light. You do not need to feel that heat to understand it. You only need to picture it glowing there ahead of you. A color at the edge of white, radiant and utterly harmless from this distance. The way a hearth across a large room is nothing but warmth and orange flicker once you are far enough back to simply watch it. The rock there does not burn in the way wood burns. There is nothing left on Mercury to catch fire. No forests, no dust of dry leaves, only bare stone absorbing raw sunlight 8 times fiercer than anything that ever reaches an earthly beach at noon. It simply grows hot, patiently, mile after mile, the way a stone left all afternoon on a windowsill grows hot. Except multiplied into something almost beyond imagining, and still nothing about it need alarm you, watching as you are from this safe, unhurried distance. That is one half of Mercury's secret. But turn your gaze only a little. Follow the curve of that small world toward the side the sun has not touched in months, and the temperature falls so far, so completely, that it drops below -180 degrees, a cold so absolute it would freeze the very air of Earth into drifts on the ground, if Earth's air could ever find its way there. Out on that dark hemisphere, the rock holds no glow at all, no ember, no last warmth lingering from some earlier hour, only the deep, settled cold of a room that has never once had its door open to daylight. Mile after silent mile of stone, under a sky crowded with stars that give no heat, only light. Furnace on one side, freezer on the other. Both true, both real, both happening on the very same small world, at the very same breathing moment, and neither one reaching across to touch the other, as though someone had drawn an impossibly clean line down the middle of a single house and told the fire it may never visit the freezer, nor the freezer ever visit the fire. Let that sit with you the way starlight sits on water, without asking anything of you in return. Because there is a place on Mercury, and you may imagine yourself standing there now, weightless, unthreatened, wrapped in whatever safety this dream affords you, where the fire and the freezer meet without ever mixing. A line, a threshold, a doorstep, if you like, running from one pole of the planet to the other, and if you were to stand upon one shoulder would lean into the last warm light of a scorching afternoon, while the other shoulder leaned into the first breath of a night colder than anything your body has ever known. And you would simply stand there, not burned, not chilled, perfectly, impossibly balanced, because the doorstep itself belongs to neither room. It is the seam between them, and seams do not carry the temperature of either side. They only mark where one ends and the other begins. Picture it the way you might picture your own front step on some ordinary evening. The porch light warm behind you, the night air cool ahead of you, and yourself standing exactly between the two, needing to choose neither. Nobody on that doorstep asks you to hurry inside or to step out into the cold. You simply stand, feeling both temperatures at once as pleasant information rather than any kind of demand, and that is precisely the posture this whole night is inviting you to borrow. A body that need not resolve anything, a mind that can hold two very different truths, furnace and freezer, without straining to reconcile them into one. Hold that image loosely tonight, because we will return to it again and again as this small world turns beneath you, standing perfectly still on the doorstep between the fire and the freezer, one side of you warmed by furnace daylight, the other cooled by the deep patience of unbroken night, and nothing at all required of you except to notice how it feels to be held between two such enormous truths without either one demanding you choose. There is something in that stillness worth carrying with you all the way to sleep. The sense that the universe can hold two extremes at once, side by side, unresolved, and that this is not a contradiction to be fixed but simply the shape the world happens to take. You do not have to explain it. You only have to rest in it a while, the way you might rest on a threshold between two rooms, feeling the temperature of each without needing to enter either. And yet the mind, even a drowsy one, likes a little unspooling of the mystery before it drifts further. So let us leave 3 small threads dangling here in the dark for you to notice, without following any of them too closely, just yet. The first is a kind of missing blanket, because a world this close to a star should, by every intuition drawn from a life on Earth, share its warmth across itself, the way a blanket shares warmth across a bed. And Mercury, as we will discover, has almost no blanket at all. The second is a clock unlike any other in this small stretch of the solar system. A clock so unhurried, so strangely wound, that a single Mercury day stretches longer than a Mercury year, and that strangeness alone begins to explain why the fire has so very long to burn, and the freezer so very long to deepen, before either side ever sees the other again. And the third is shadow. Certain shadows on this world that have never once lifted, tucked into craters near the poles where the sun, in all its 4 billion years of shining, has simply never managed to look. A missing blanket. A slow clock. Shadows that never lift. 3 quiet keys to the same locked door, and we will turn each one in its own unhurried time. For now, simply float here above the terminator. That is the word given to this line, where day gives way to night, though you need not remember it. Only feel it and let yourself wonder, the way you might wonder at the edge of sleep about something too large and too gentle to frighten you. How can one small stone of a planet, barely bigger than a large moon, hold within its single turning body both the nearest thing to fire and the nearest thing to absolute cold that a rocky world can know? How does it carry both without tearing itself apart, without one side ever managing to warm the other, without the whole small sphere simply melting into some exhausted uniform gray? There must be a reason the furnace stays a furnace and the freezer stays a freezer. An answer folded somewhere into the physics of this strange nearby world. And it begins, as so many quiet mysteries do, with something Mercury simply does not have. Something Earth wears so constantly, so invisibly, that you have never once had to think about it keeping you whole through every one of your own ordinary nights. And the first thread of the answer, the one waiting closest to hand, is the blanket that was never given to this small world in the first place. You can feel, even from here, floating above it, that something is missing. The kind of missing that has nothing violent in it. Nothing torn away in a single moment. Only an absence that has simply always been true. Mercury keeps almost no atmosphere at all. What little it has is not really air in any sense your body would recognize. No wind to lift a curtain, no clouds to soften a horizon, no weather of any kind ever moving across that ancient ground. It is called an exosphere, and the word itself sounds like a held breath, thin and reluctant, made of stray atoms so sparse that they hardly ever touch one another. Sodium, potassium, oxygen, helium, drifting particles knocked loose from the rock by sunlight and by the endless soft rain of micrometeorites, each atom taking its own private, unhurried path before it escapes back out into space, or drifts down again to settle on the surface. There are more molecules in a single breath you take right now, wherever you are lying, than in the entire sky above Mercury. If you could stand on that ground and look upward, there would be no blue to greet you, no pale wash of daytime haze, only the same black, star-crowded dark that hangs there at midnight, even with the sun blazing enormous and white directly overhead. Let that settle for a moment, the way it settles over the planet itself. A sky with almost nothing in it, a world essentially uncovered, unclothed, laid open directly to the sun on one side and directly to the black of space on the other. And because there is no blanket, there is no sharing. This is the heart of it, the plain, patient mechanism behind the whole impossible contradiction. On a world with real air, heat is a traveler. It rides on wind, it climbs into clouds, it gets carried from the place where the sun is pouring itself down into the place where the sun has already gone, arriving late, but arriving all the same. Like warmth held in a stone long after the fire that warmed it has been banked for the night. That traveling is what makes an evening on Earth still comfortable an hour after sunset, what lets your afternoon linger softly into your dusk. But Mercury has no such traveler, no messenger, no means of carrying anything anywhere. Whatever heat lands on the sunlit hemisphere is absorbed directly into bare rock and dust, and whatever heat leaves does so by radiating straight back up, straight out into the vacuum, with nothing overhead to catch it, hold it, or bend it sideways toward the dark. Heat arrives, and heat departs, in almost the same breath along almost the same vertical line. It never gets the chance to wander. It never gets the chance to cross over. Even the ground itself refuses to help, since dry, airless rock and dust make a poor conductor, holding whatever warmth it gains close to its own crust, rather than passing it sideways to its neighbor. The day side and the night side of Mercury are, in this one essential sense, strangers to each other, each existing according to its own private arithmetic of light, neither one aware of what the other is feeling. Picture it as plainly as you can, because the plainness itself is part of what makes it so peaceful to imagine, so free of anything sharp or alarming. Where the sun stands high, the ground has nothing to shield it and nothing to cool it, no ocean to draw the heat downward, no ozone haze, no gentle haze of moisture to filter the light before it lands. The rock simply receives, and receives and receives, climbing toward temperatures near 430 degrees Celsius, hot enough that certain metals would run like water across it, and only a short distance away, past the line where daylight ends, that same kind of rock, cut off from every source of warmth, radiates the last of its stored heat out toward the stars, all through the impossibly long Mercurian night, sinking toward nearly 180 degrees below freezing. A difference of some 600 degrees, held apart not by any great distance, but by the width of a shadow. Two temperatures that would seem to belong to entirely different worlds, existing at the very same moment, on the very same small sphere of stone, separated by nothing more than the presence or absence of sunlight directly overhead. No blanket to spread the difference, no breeze to carry mercy from one side to the other. It helps, in this floating, weightless quiet, to think for a moment of home, of Earth, and the ordinary miracle of its evenings. Here, an atmosphere some 100 kilometers thick wraps the whole planet like a worn, familiar quilt, thin in places, dense near the ground, but continuous, unbroken, always doing its slow work of moving warmth from where there is too much of it to where there is too little. Winds carry heat from the equator toward the poles. Oceans store the day's warmth, and release it through the night, patient reservoirs holding the sun's gift long after the sun itself has slipped away. Clouds trap outgoing heat and hand a portion of it back down to the ground, so that a summer night rarely plunges to the same cold as a winter one, and a desert without cloud cover feels the difference keenly, growing far colder after sunset than the greener places nearby, precisely because it has less of that atmospheric quilt working on its behalf. Think of how the last light of your own evenings lingers, warm on a wall long after the sun has dropped past the rooftops, the day letting go of you slowly instead of all at once. Earth's nights are tender because Earth's air insists on tenderness, insists on evening things out, insists that no place should have to face its darkness entirely alone. Mercury has no such insistence. Mercury's night is left to fend for itself, and so it falls, uncushioned, all the way down toward the cold of open space. And then there is Venus, drifting farther out from the sun than Mercury, second rather than first, and yet hotter, hotter everywhere, hotter by day and by night, hotter at its equator and at its poles, hotter than Mercury's most furnace-lit noon, despite receiving a good deal less sunlight to begin with. It seems, at first, like a small riddle nested inside the larger one, but the answer is the same shape as everything else in this movement, only turned the opposite way. Venus wears the thickest blanket of any world in this whole neighborhood of the sun, a dense, crushing atmosphere made mostly of carbon dioxide, 90 times the pressure of Earth's air pressing down on its surface, wrapped in clouds of sulfuric acid that trap heat with such stubborn thoroughness that almost nothing escapes back to space at all. Where Mercury has too little cover and loses its warmth as fast as it gains it, Venus has too much cover and cannot release its warmth no matter how long it waits in darkness. A Venusian night can stretch on for months, and the ground beneath it will still glow near 460 degrees, as scorching at midnight as at noon, because that thick sky simply will not let the heat go. Venus proves, almost like a companion experiment floating nearby in the same dark, that closeness to the sun is not really the deciding factor here. Distance from the fire matters far less than what a world wears, or does not wear, against the cold. So the blanket, or its absence, is not a small detail tucked somewhere in the margins of Mercury's story. It is very nearly the whole of it. A planet with next to no air cannot help but become two planets in one, a burning half and a frozen half, each keeping faithfully to its own temperature, as though the other did not exist. And yet, holding both truths at once as you drift here, you notice something quieter than either extreme, something that was there all along and only now comes into focus. Between the blazing ground baking under a white sky and the black ground glittering under starlight lies a boundary, and that boundary is not chaotic, not torn, not some jagged seam stitched hastily between two different worlds. It is a single, unbroken, remarkably steady line, curving all the way around the planet, patient and continuous, moving at its own unhurried pace across the ancient stone below. It is the one place on all of Mercury where neither extreme fully wins, the one place where fire and freezer meet without violence, sharing the same ground for a little while before letting each other go. That line is the doorstep itself, the very threshold this whole night has been circling toward, and it is worth turning your attention now to how slowly, how deliberately, that threshold actually moves. And because the two sides never share their warmth, never trade so much as a whisper of air between them, there has to be a place where one ends and the other begins. A line. A seam. A single long thread stitched around the middle of this small world, and it is here, at last, that our doorstep stops being only a feeling and becomes something you could almost trace with a finger, if a finger could ever reach so far. This is the terminator, the boundary between day and night, and on Mercury it does something no boundary on Earth ever does. It moves so unhurriedly, so evenly, that a person standing beside it, matching its pace, would never have to run to keep the sunrise exactly where it is, hovering at the rim of the world, neither rising nor fully arriving, forever caught in the act of almost beginning. Picture the speed of it. Along Mercury's equator, that line of first light and last light creeps forward at something close to a walking pace, a little over 3.5 kilometers an hour, the kind of unhurried stride you might take on an ordinary evening, hands loose, no destination in mind. You could match it without effort. You could fall into step beside the boundary itself and simply walk. And the dawn would walk with you, always a few paces ahead, always a few paces behind, never quite catching you and never quite leaving. There is something almost tender in that thought, a horizon that keeps your pace, a light that waits for you the way a companion waits, unwilling to hurry off and leave you behind in the dark. On a world so extreme in every other way, the one thing it offers freely is time. Time to notice. Time to simply be present at the edge of things, standing still on the doorstep even as the doorstep itself glides forward beneath your feet. Compare that, for a moment, to the boundary you already know without ever having thought of it as a boundary at all, the one that sweeps across your own turning Earth, carrying morning from one coastline to the next. That line races. It has to, on a world spinning as briskly as this one, crossing whole oceans and continents before a single unhurried breath could finish counting them. Blink. In the scale of a planet's day, and it has already moved a country further along, but here, on this smaller and stranger world, the sunrise takes its time in the truest sense, not sluggish, not stalled, simply patient. The way certain things in nature are patient, the way a tide takes its whole quiet hour to turn, the way frost takes its whole night to spread across a window pane, each motion given exactly the span it needs, and not 1 second less. It is worth resting in the shape of that boundary a moment longer before we move past it, because it is not a knife edge, not a sudden slammed door between blaze and blackness. It is a band. A twilight band, wide and soft in its own patient way, where the rock is neither fully in the furnace nor fully in the freezer, but somewhere unhurried in between, cooling by degrees, warming by degrees, easing itself from one extreme toward the other, the way a held breath eases slowly out. Within this band, long shadows stretch impossibly far across the cratered ground, thrown by a sun that sits low and heavy on the horizon, its light thinned and reddened, its heat softened from a roar to something more like a low, steady murmur against the stone. Here, the surface remembers the blaze it has just left and anticipates the cold it is walking toward, and for a handful of hours, it holds neither one fully. It simply rests in the passage. Consider, too, how long that easing actually lasts, measured not in minutes, but in something closer to a full, unhurried day of our own. Because the Terminator moves so patiently across the equator, the twilight band it drags behind it is no fleeting flicker of pink and gray. It is a threshold that a single patch of ground might spend the better part of an ordinary Earth day passing through, rock cooling by careful degrees the whole while, heat leaking upward into the black in its own unhurried rhythm, never all at once. Never in a rush to be done with it. An entire day of your own waking hours could pass, while one stretch of Mercury's ground eased itself from the last blaze of afternoon to the first true dark of night, and within that stretched-out passage, there would be time enough for the rock to sigh out its stored heat, the way a held breath sighs out at the very end, unhurried, complete, asking nothing of the moment but to be allowed to finish. If you let yourself imagine standing in that band, not because anyone ever will, but because imagining is free and costs the rock nothing, you might notice how the ground beneath a fictional footstep would yet hold a memory of noon's fire, a stored warmth radiating upward, even as the air, if there were air, would already be tasting of the coming night. And a few dozen meters further along that same band, closer to the true edge of darkness, the ground would already be surrendering the last of its warmth, giving it up to a black sky salted with stars that never dim, never twinkle, never blink behind clouds, because there are no clouds here to blink behind. The whole band is an unhurried negotiation between fire and freezer, a threshold thick enough to walk across without falling instantly into either extreme. It is the widened, breathing version of the very doorstep we began on, no longer a single line, but a whole unhurried room of in-between light, where oven eases into freezer over the span of unhurried hours, the way a held note fades rather than stops. Within that patient band itself, there are textures worth lingering over, small details that reward an unhurried attention the way the last light of any evening does. The long shadows cast by crater rims lie down across the ground like something poured rather than cast, pooling in low places, stretching thin and dark across raised ones. And where two shadows meet and overlap, the rock beneath them sits in a doubled coolness, a small deepening of the same slow surrender happening everywhere else along the band. Boulders that stood bright and sharp-edged under the noon glare soften now into rounded silhouettes, their far sides already given over to the coming dark, while their near sides linger with a faint, fading warmth, as though each stone were itself standing on its own small doorstep, one flank yet remembering the fire, the other already leaning into the freezer. Nothing here happens abruptly. Nothing lurches. The whole band eases forward the way a slow tide eases up ashore, patient, unbroken, certain of arriving without ever needing to rush. And this is where the strangeness of it starts to ask its own question, quietly, the way a good mystery always does. If Mercury sits nearer to the sun than any other world, closer to that furnace than anything else in this whole wide wheeling family of planets, why does its boundary between day and night move with such unhurried, almost sleepy grace? Why does the line crawl instead of race on a smaller, faster spinning world? That seam between light and dark might sweep past in minutes, the sun leaping up and plunging down before a single long breath could finish. But not here. Here the dawn arrives the way a very old friend arrives, without hurry, without apology, taking exactly as long as it takes, and never once made to feel rushed. The answer, it turns out, has nothing to do with distance from the sun at all, and everything to do with the way this particular world keeps its own private sense of time. Mercury does not spin the way you might expect the innermost planet to spin, quick, tight, breathless with proximity to that overwhelming light. It does something almost the opposite. It turns on its axis with a slowness that seems, at first telling, hard to reconcile with how close it huddles to that furnace door. And it is this, the pace of its spin, wound together with the pace of its long looping path around the sun, that decides how quickly or how slowly that seam of twilight is allowed to travel across the stone. Mercury, it turns out, keeps the strangest clock of any world in this whole quiet neighborhood of the sun. A clock built not from ordinary days and ordinary years, but from something rarer, something almost knotted. And it is that clock, ticking so differently from any clock you have ever known, that lets the line move at a walking pace, that lets the dawn become a companion rather than a blur, that lets the doorstep hold still long enough to actually be stood upon. A clock this strange deserves to be entered the way you'd enter a room you've only ever seen from the hallway, unhurried, a little curious, in no rush to understand it all at once. So let the twilight band drift below you a moment longer, and let your attention turn from the line itself to the hidden mechanism dragging it forward. Because that patient crawl across the equator, that walking pace of a boundary between furnace and freezer, is not some accident of geometry. It is the visible trace of a timekeeping so unlike anything Earth ever taught your body that it is almost easier to feel than to explain, and here, held above it, feeling is allowed to come first. Begin with the spin. Mercury turns once on its axis in about 59 Earth days. Not a day as you know a day. Not the brisk 24 hours that carries you from waking to waking again. But a long, low turning, patient enough that a single Mercury rotation could contain nearly 2 entire months of your own life. Now set beside it the orbit, Mercury circles the Sun once every 88 Earth days, tracing its path faster than any other planet, because it sits closest to that fire, and the fire's pull hurries it along. 2 numbers, 59 and 88, and if you let them rest together in your mind for a moment, something almost musical appears. They sit in a ratio of 3 to 2, spin to orbit, so tidally locked that scientists simply call it the 3-2 resonance. Not by chance. By the Sun's own gravity, reaching across millions of kilometers and over the deep hush of geological time, kneading Mercury's rotation until it settled into this exact unshakable rhythm, the way a hand smooths a wrinkle from a blanket until the fabric finally lies flat and still. It helps to picture what that resonance actually means for the little world's motion, rather than only holding the numbers. For every 2 full trips Mercury makes around the Sun, it turns on its axis exactly 3 times. No more, no less, forever. Earlier watchers once assumed the ratio must be 1-to-1, that Mercury kept a single face turned always toward the fire, the way your own moon keeps a single face turned always toward you. And for a long while, that seemed the tidier, more sensible answer. But the rock itself was quietly keeping better records than the assumption, and when radar finally listened closely enough, it heard the true rhythm, 3 careful turns for every 2 hurried circuits. A dance step matched not to convenience, but to the actual, unhurried tug of gravity working on a world shaped slightly unevenly, slightly heavier on one side than the other, so that the Sun's pull had something to catch on to and hold. You might expect, hearing spin and orbit locked so neatly, that a day and a year would simply match, that noon would return to noon in some clean, familiar interval. But Mercury's path around the Sun is not a tidy circle. It is markedly eccentric, swinging in close enough at perihelion to feel the fire's full attention, and drifting far enough out at aphelion to feel at ease. And that stretched, elongated orbit tangles the arithmetic in the gentlest, strangest way. Combine the 3-2 spin with that eccentric loop, and something unexpected falls out of the equation. A full solar day on Mercury, the true span from one noon to the next noon, sunrise to sunrise, the interval any patient watcher standing on that surface would actually feel, stretches to roughly 176 Earth days. Say that again, slowly. and let it land. 176 days between one sunrise noon and the next. 2 entire Mercury years pass, 2 full trips around the sun, before a single Mercury day completes. On this small world nearest the fire, the year is short and hurried, and the day is long beyond any human bedtime rhythm, a whole spun-out, unhurried breath in which 2 years quietly happen, just so the light can find its way back to where it started. Sit with that a moment. On Earth, your days and years move at speeds that fit your body. A day for sleeping and waking, a year for seasons turning. On Mercury, the 2 rhythms have come utterly unstitched from each other, spin racing ahead in its own low hum while the years lap it, twice over, before the sky finishes even one complete cycle of light. It is a clock built from asymmetry, a timepiece where the small hand and the large hand no longer share the same face. And yet it is not chaos, it is exact, predictable down to the decimal, a clockwork every bit as faithful as the ticking on your own nightstand, only tuned to some vaster, more patient scale. And here the sky itself begins to do something almost impossible to picture from anywhere on Earth. At most points on Mercury's surface, the strange arithmetic simply produces that long, ordinary arc, sunrise. A slow climb, a slow descent, sunset, and then the long night waiting on the other side. But at 2 particular longitudes, the ones that face the sun exactly at those closest, fastest points of the eccentric orbit, something else happens, something the ancient sky was never built to show a creature like you. Near perihelion, Mercury's orbital speed briefly outruns its own rotation. The little world is moving around the sun faster, for a short stretch, than it is turning on its axis, and from the ground, this means the sun's ordinary rise reverses itself. Imagine watching a sunrise begin, as any sunrise begins. The disk lifting gently over the horizon, climbing, and then pausing, hesitating in place, and then, astonishingly, sinking back down below the horizon it had just cleared, the whole sky briefly running backward, before gathering itself and rising once more, this time for good, to continue its long crawl toward that impossibly distant noon. A double sunrise. A sunset that arrives before its sunrise has even finished. Standing at one of those few longitudes, you would watch the sun perform something almost hesitant, almost shy, testing the horizon once before committing to the sky, as though even the fire itself paused on the doorstep before stepping fully through. There is no danger in any of this, nothing to brace against, only mechanism, only the faithful turning of a small stone under laws that never waver. It is simply what happens when a world spins slowly enough and swings close enough and far enough from its star in the same breath that its sky stops behaving the way skies behave anywhere gentler. Every rule bends only because the numbers require it to, and having bent, the sky returns, obedient again, to its long, patient arc. If you were the one standing there, at just such a longitude, waiting through the long Mercury night for that particular dawn, you would feel no urgency in it at all, only a widening curiosity, the way you might watch a held breath finally let go. The horizon would brighten first, the way any horizon brightens, a low warmth seeping upward through whatever thin haze of stray atoms passes for this world's almost non-existent air. Then the disk itself would edge into view, small and searing and 3 times the width you're used to, and you would watch it rise the way you've watched 1,000 sunrises rise, unremarkable, ordinary, following its arc. And then, quietly, it would stop. Simply stop climbing, hang there a while at its low angle, and begin, with no drama at all, no falling, no plunging, only a slow easing backward, to sink beneath the horizon it had only just cleared. The stars you'd only just lost to daylight would creep back into view along that edge, and then, in its own unhurried time, the sun would try again, lifting once more over the same horizon, and this time keep climbing, committed now, carrying on toward that far off, patient noon still 170 some days away. Nothing frightening in a sky that hesitates like that. Only a world showing you, plainly, that its clock runs on a different set of gears than yours, and that difference is allowed to simply be interesting rather than alarming, a curiosity offered rather than a warning given. So this is Mercury's clock, 59 days to turn once, 88 to circle the sun, 3 of one matched to 2 of the other in a lock the sun itself set ages ago, an eccentric loop stretching the true day out to 176 Earth days. 2 Mercury years folded inside a single sunrise to sunrise span, and at certain rare longitudes, a sky so caught between its own hurrying orbit and its own unhurried spin that the sun appears to rise, hesitate, retreat, and rise again before finally beginning its long, long climb toward noon. And the Terminator you watched crawling at that walking pace across the surface below. That line is simply this whole clock made visible, the shadow's edge inching forward exactly as slowly as this strange arithmetic demands, no faster, no slower, keeping perfect time with a spin and an orbit that argue with each other every single day and yet, remarkably, never once fall out of step. Let your gaze come down now, away from that odd looping sky and its double dawns. Down toward the ground itself, toward the ancient stone that has done nothing but endure this rhythm for longer than memory reaches, turning, circling, warming, cooling, rising, pausing, rising again. 4.5 billion years of the same patient arithmetic pressed into rock, waiting quietly below for you to notice what all that endurance has written into its surface. And beneath that strange sky, where noon can pause and reconsider itself before continuing on, there lies a body of rock old enough to have watched it happen billions of times over, patient in a way nothing alive could ever be. Let the gaze drop now, away from the doorway of shifting light, down to the ground itself, down to the world that has stood on this threshold for 4.5 billion years, and simply kept standing. The first thing the eye finds is familiar, almost like coming home to a place seen only in dreams. Craters, countless craters, overlapping and layered and worn, pockmarking the surface in patterns that echo the moon so closely that a traveler set down at random might wonder, for a drowsy moment, which small world they had landed on. There is a reason for the resemblance. Both bodies are airless, both defenseless against the old rain of rock and ice that fell through the young solar system, and neither has wind or rivers or shifting plates to smooth away the record. So the wounds simply stay. Small craters nest inside larger ones, generation after generation, stamped into the same patient stone, a diary written in impacts instead of ink, its oldest pages near the bottom, legible still. Some of these hollows are barely wider than a room, no more than a dimple pressed into dust that has waited there since before there were tides on any ocean anywhere. Others stretch for hundreds of kilometers, their walls terraced in long, shallow steps where the ground slumped inward after the impact, their floors flooded long ago by dark, smooth lava that cooled into level plains. Rays of pale, pulverized rock fan outward from the youngest of these scars, bright streaks flung across older, dimmer ground, marking them as the newcomers in a story that otherwise unfolds too slowly for any single watcher to notice moving. Walk that ground in imagination, unhurried. And each footstep would cross millions of years without a sound to mark the passing. Follow that terrain far enough, and it gathers itself into something larger than any single wound could be. The Caloris Basin. A scar so vast, it could hold most of a continent within its rim, nearly 1,500 kilometers from one edge to the other. It was born in an instant, unimaginably long ago, when something enormous, an asteroid or the shard of a broken world, came down out of the dark at tremendous speed and struck this small planet so hard that the ground itself rang like a bell. Picture that, if it helps to picture something so old, not violence as we might fear it, but a single, ancient, finished event, its energy long since spent. Its fury settled into shape and stillness, safe now, sealed into the geologic past the way a scar settles into skin. What remains is a ring of mountains thrown up around a floor of fractured, ridged plains, later softened by lava that welled up from below and cooled into place. The basin does not hurt, it rests. Stand at the rim of Caloris in the mind's eye, and the far wall would be lost past the curve of the horizon, a basin large enough to swallow a small nation, its outer mountains catching the low light of a sun 3 times the size it appears from Earth, its floor a wide plain of solidified lava crossed by faint wrinkle ridges, the kind of long, low folds that form when a great sheet of once molten rock cools and settles, tightening almost imperceptibly across its own breadth. Nothing moves there now. Whatever violence built the place finished itself long before there was anyone to witness it. And what is left behind carries none of the original shock, only its enormous, tranquil outline. And here is the part almost too strange to say aloud. Though it is simply true, the force of that ancient impact did not stay where it landed. It traveled through the entire body of the planet, gathering itself, and burst back out on the far side, the point on Mercury exactly opposite the strike, what astronomers call the antipodal point. There, half a world away from the crater itself, the ground is broken into a hilly, jumbled terrain unlike anything nearby, low hills and cracks tangled together as though the whole landscape had trembled and never quite settled back into its earlier order. Some who study it imagine the shockwaves of that one great blow racing around the curve of the planet from every direction at once, meeting on the far side, lifting the crust there into this strange, hushed chaos, a single moment, billions of years past, still legible on both sides of a world, one scar with 2 faces, connected underground the way the fire and the freezer above are connected by nothing but a slow line of shadow. Beyond the craters, beyond even Caloris and its far trembled twin, the surface carries a different kind of mark, quieter, and in its way even more telling. Long, curved cliffs rise from the plains in places, some of them running for hundreds of kilometers, standing a kilometer or more above the ground beside them. These are the lobate scarps, and unlike the craters, they were not made by anything falling from the sky. They were made from within. Picture the whole planet, long ago, still carrying more warmth in its interior than it does now, its iron heart larger and hotter, its rocky shell not yet fully set. Over the eons that followed, that inner warmth slowly ebbed away into the cold of space, and as it left, the planet itself contracted, not dramatically, not violently, only surely, the way a piece of fruit left out slowly wrinkles and draws in on itself as the moisture leaves it. But rock does not wrinkle softly, it cracks. As Mercury's whole circumference shrank, its brittle outer crust had nowhere to go but to buckle and shear, one section of ground sliding up and over its neighbor along enormous faults. Those raised edges are the scarps we still find today, wearing the entire planet's slow, patient shrinking written plainly across its face. Mile after quiet mile, easy to read once you know what you are looking at, impossible to unsee once you do. And even now, though that grand ancient cooling has long since slowed to something almost too faint to measure, a smaller version of the same story repeats itself every single day and night that passes here, meaning, on this world, every 176 of ours. Each time the Terminator finishes its long, unhurried crossing, each time noon gives way at last to the freezing dark, the ground itself responds. Stone that has spent weeks nearly at the temperature of a kitchen oven cools. And as it cools, it contracts, fractionally, invisibly to any single glance, and yet real, a tightening no different in kind from the great shrinking that built the scarps, only smaller, gentler, played out over one long Mercury day instead of over the planet's whole lifetime. Then the Terminator sweeps back the other way. The fire returns, and the same stretch of ground expands again, swelling faintly under the returning light. Heat, cold, expansion, contraction, over and over, patient and unhurried, a rhythm so slow that it registers not as motion, but almost as breath, as though the whole planet were inhaling on its sunlit side and exhaling into its shadowed one, cycle after cycle, for longer than there have been eyes anywhere to notice. It is a strange kind of resilience when you sit with it a while. A world with no air to comfort it, no water to soften its edges, holds itself together anyway, absorbing 4.5 billion years of impacts and one relentless rhythm of scorching and freezing, and simply endures, unbothered, unhurried, keeping its shape. The craters do not need healing. The scarps do not need mending. The ground has made its peace with standing exactly where it stands, half warmed, half cooled, and asks nothing different of itself night after night, day after day, century after century. There is something almost restful in that thought, that endurance need not be effortful, that a world can simply be old and marked and whole all at once. Its every scar a kind of proof that it survived whatever made it. No craving to be smoother, no wish to be younger, only stone, holding its shape through heat and through cold, through impact, and through the long, ordinary passage of billions of unremarkable afternoons. And now, having traced those markings as far as they will lead across the ground, let the ground itself begin to fall away below. No effort needed here either. No climbing, no reaching. Only a soft loosening, as if the same slow patience the planet has shown for eons were now reaching up to hold something far smaller and far younger, lifting it clear of the crater fields and the ancient cliffs, past the last dust settling back into stillness, up into the black and silent open, where the whole curved shape of Mercury can finally be seen at once, doorstep and all, and where nothing at all is left to do but drift. And now that the rock has fallen away beneath you, now that the cliffs and craters have dropped into a hush of distance, there is only this: you are being carried. Not walking, not reaching, not holding on to anything at all. Carried. The doorstep is still here. You can feel it along the length of your body. Warmth pressed soft against one shoulder, a cool hush settled along the other. But the doorstep itself has begun to drift, and you drift with it, weightless, unhurried, asking nothing of yourself and being asked nothing in return. There was a moment, back on the rock, when your own weight still mattered, when the idea of standing, of holding yourself upright against some pull, still lingered somewhere at the back of your body. That moment is gone now. It slipped away the instant you lifted off the shrinking cliffs and let the planet's whole low, patient gravity fall away beneath your feet. Up here, there is nothing left to hold you down, and nothing that wants to. You simply float, easy as a held breath let go, easy as a thought that no longer needs finishing. Imagine drifting like this. Imagine the small effort of holding yourself upright simply dissolving, the way a held breath dissolves into a long, slow exhale. There is no ground beneath you now, no need for ground. Mercury turns below, patient and vast, and you are simply here, above it, suspended in the kind of stillness that has nothing to prove. Let your shoulders soften into that stillness. Let your hands rest wherever they are resting. You are not doing this. It is being done for you, the way a tide carries a shell without asking the shell to swim. Beneath you the Terminator slides on, that long twilight seam between furnace and freezer, and from up here it no longer looks like a line at all. It looks like a slow exhale of light easing across gray stone, the last gold of afternoon giving way, unhurried to the deep and steady dark. You watched it earlier at a walking pace, close to the ground, almost near enough to imagine falling into step beside it. From here the whole curve of the world holds it instead, a soft seam stitched around a small, round planet, moving at its own contented pace whether or not anyone is watching. And someone is watching. You are. This is the part where the science becomes sensation, where the numbers loosen their grip and simply become feeling. Mercury is racing, ferociously, unbelievably fast, nearly 47 kilometers every single second, faster than any other planet swings around the sun. Fast enough that if you tried to hold that number in your mind for long, it would slip loose and scatter. And yet, none of that speed touches you. None of it asks anything of your body. You are simply held above it, weightless, while a whole world hurls itself through the dark at a speed too vast to feel, and feels, from where you rest, like nothing more than the gentlest of drifts. This is the strange kindness of scale. The faster the universe moves, the stiller it can make you feel. Once you stop trying to keep up with it, somewhere far below and far behind, the sun itself hangs enormous and patient in a black sky, pouring its fire down onto rock that will spend the day's long, unhurried hours drinking in that heat. You feel none of its blaze up here, only its glow, a low, honeyed light lying along your skin, easy and distant, like the last warmth of a fire in another room. It does not ask you to move closer. It does not ask you to move away. It simply arrives, and you simply receive it, and that is the whole of the exchange. Listen, if listening is even the word for it. There is no wind here to carry a listening toward, no air to carry heat, and so also no air to carry sound. This is the total silence of vacuum, not an empty, aching silence, not a silence with something missing from it, but a full and rounded silence, complete in itself, the way a held note becomes its own kind of fullness the instant before it fades. No hum, no rush, no far-off drone of weather or engine or breath but your own. If you have ever lain very still at the very edge of sleep and felt the whole day fall away, layer by layer, until only your own slow pulse remained, this is something like that. Magnified until it fills the whole of space around you. Nothing to listen for, nothing asking to be heard, only the quiet, and you resting easily inside it. And below, so far below now that the craters have smoothed into soft gray shadow and pale gold light, the slow line keeps sliding. It does not hurry to reach you. It does not need to arrive anywhere by a certain hour. It simply moves, the way a tide moves, the way breath moves in and out of a sleeping chest, drawing the last warmth of day back into the folded dark, drawing the first pale gold of dawn up out of the folded dark on the other side. You do not have to track it. You do not have to understand it right now, or hold on to any of the numbers from before. You only have to let it move beneath you while you stay just where you are, held. Because that is the part worth resting in. Longer than any of the rest, you are held. Nothing here requires your effort. The warmth along one side of you asks nothing. It simply reaches you. The way early light reaches a windowsill, indifferent and generous at once. The cool hush along the other side asks nothing either. It simply rests there, patient. The way shade rests along the far side of a house on a bright afternoon. Between them, exactly on the doorstep, you are neither too warm nor too cool. Simply carried, simply steady. The whole small drama of fire and freezer passing on either side of you, like weather passing outside a window, while you lie warm and unbothered beneath a blanket that was never actually necessary out here. Because nothing out here is reaching for you at all. This is what it might feel like to be carried by something far larger than yourself, and trust it completely. Mercury does all the moving. Your only task, if it can even be called a task, is to remain soft in its keeping, to let your breathing slow, to match the unhurried slide of light below, to let your thoughts loosen the way a held object loosens in an open hand. There is nowhere else you need to be. There is nothing else you need to do. The doorstep holds you exactly where you are, and the two halves of the world go on existing peacefully on either side of you, needing nothing from each other, and needing nothing from you either. Somewhere in this stillness, you might notice how little effort it takes to simply keep drifting. No current to fight, no current to follow. The vacuum around you carries no resistance at all, and so once you are moving, you simply continue moving, smooth and unbroken, the way a thought drifts on undisturbed at the edge of sleep, carrying itself forward without any push behind it. You could stay like this, held on the doorstep, for as long as you wished, one shoulder warm, one shoulder cool, the whole of you perfectly, evenly balanced between them. And slowly, so slowly you might not notice the moment it begins, the drift starts to lean. Not toward the blazing daylight side, and not toward the deep cold night, but sideways, upward. The way a leaf drifting on still water might ease almost imperceptibly toward one bank without ever seeming to choose it. You feel yourself carried away from the terminator now, away from that long, slow seam of dusk and dawn, up toward the rounded crown of the little world, where the light begins to slant lower and lower along the horizon, no matter which side of the line you are on. Up here, the difference between day and night starts to soften at the edges, folding into something gentler, something more shadowed and more still. You are being carried poleward now, unhurried, weightless, the same steady carrying as before, only the direction has changed, easing you toward the quiet crowns of the planet, where the great, brimming light of the sun never quite manages to climb very high at all. Somewhere ahead, tucked inside the deepest hollows of old crater floors, there are places the sunlight has never once reached. Not once. Not in all the slow turning of this small world's long and patient history. You do not have to imagine what waits there, just yet. You only have to keep drifting, held, unbothered, while the warm doorstep light of Mercury's day begins to fall away behind you, and something older, stiller, and infinitely quieter waits ahead in the dark. And so you drift on, poleward, past the last latitudes where the Terminator still sweeps its patient circuit, into a region where the ordinary rules of day and night stop applying altogether. Down there, at the very top of the world, and at the very bottom of it, the horizon holds the sun forever low, forever grazing, and inside certain craters the light never arrives at all. You come to rest above one such crater now, hovering in the hush of vacuum, looking down into a bowl of shadow so complete it seems to hold its own kind of gravity, pulling the gaze inward and down. This is the place the whole journey has been leaning toward without saying so. The freezer door beside the fire, and it has never once opened. The reason is written in a number almost too small to imagine. Mercury's axis, the invisible rod it spins around, tilts away from straight up by barely 0.03 of 1 degree, less than the width of a coin held at arm's length against the sky, less than a whisper of a lean. Earth tilts by 23 degrees, and that lean is the whole reason we have seasons. The reason the sun climbs high in summer and slides low in winter. Mercury barely tilts at all, so the sun makes almost the same low arc across its equator, year after year, century after century, with no seasonal wandering to speak of. At the poles, this near-perfect uprightness has a strange consequence. The floors of certain deep craters, ringed by their own tall walls, never once catch a ray of that low equatorial light. The rim gets grazed by sunrise and sunset in an endless shallow loop. The floor, just a few kilometers down, sits in a dark that has not been interrupted since long before there were eyes anywhere to notice it. Picture the geometry the way you might picture a tall walled well standing in a field at the coldest, longest dusk imaginable, a dusk that never deepens into full night and never lightens into morning, holding steady at that one low angle forever. The wall of the well catches the last thread of light along its upper rim, a faint gold line traced against black. But down at the bottom, where the well is deepest, the walls block that low light completely, the way a raised collar blocks a breeze from reaching the back of your neck. No sunrise has ever climbed high enough to reach over that particular rim and touch that particular floor. It is not simply nighttime down there. It is a shadow with no clock. A shadow that predates the idea of clocks, undisturbed for as long as the crater itself has existed, which on a world with almost no weather to erase anything can mean billions of years. For a long while, this was only a reasonable guess, a piece of geometry worked out on paper and left waiting for proof. Then, starting in the 1990s, radio dishes on Earth, enormous listening bowls set into hillsides, among them the great dish once cradled in a Puerto Rican valley at Arecibo, aimed patient beams of radar at Mercury's poles and waited for the echo to return. Ordinary rock sends a scattered, muddy echo bouncing back, but certain patches near the poles sent back something unusually bright and unusually clean, in a way that matched almost nothing except one substance: water ice. Its crystal structure reflecting radar in that same telltale sharpened way that ice does when radar is bounced off the polar caps of other worlds. From 100 million kilometers away, without a single instrument ever touching the surface, those returning radio waves were already carrying the shape of something frozen and hidden inside the shadow. Confirmation came later, and closer, when a spacecraft finally settled into orbit around Mercury itself and spent years circling low over exactly these places. Its instruments built to sense, not light, since there was none to sense, but the faint traces neutrons and reflected laser pulses leave behind. Where the ground held water ice, the neutron signal changed in a specific, recognizable way, and pulses of laser light bounced back with a brightness that matched a frozen surface rather than bare stone. Crater after crater near both poles carried the same signature. The spacecraft mapped it patiently, orbit after orbit, until what had been a radar hint from Earth became a confirmed, cataloged layer of ice tucked into permanent shadow at both ends of the hottest planet's axis. Where did it come from? Ice surviving on the world closest to the Sun. The most patient explanation is also the gentlest one. Comets and certain asteroids, wandering bodies built partly of frozen water, have been drifting through the inner solar system and striking every rocky surface they meet for as long as the solar system has existed. Most of what they carried would simply boil away on contact with sun-scorched ground. But a small fraction of the water freed by each ancient impact would drift as vapor across the surface, and by ordinary chance, some molecules would settle into these permanently shadowed hollows, these cold traps where the local temperature never rises high enough to let ice escape back to space. Molecule by molecule, impact by impact, over spans of time too long for a single mind to hold at once, a shallow layer of ice built up and stayed, sealed inside its own shadow like snow gathered in the coldest corner of a garden and never once touched by sun. Some of these hidden deposits sit beneath a fine covering of ordinary dust and broken rock, a thin dark blanket only inches deep laid down by countless tiny impacts over the ages, insulating the ice below the way a light layer of snow can insulate the ground beneath it, keeping what lies underneath even steadier than the open shadow alone would manage. Other patches lie closer to the surface, their brightness under laser light almost startling against the surrounding graystone, like pale patches glimpsed at the bottom of a well when a lantern is finally lowered down to them. Estimates drawn from all these instruments together suggest the ice at both poles could add up to a mass measured in trillions of kilograms, spread thin across countless shadowed floors, none of it deep, none of it dramatic to look at. All of it simply patient, waiting the way stone waits, the way shadow waits, needing no one to notice it in order to keep existing. Sit with the distances involved, because they are the heart of the wonder. The crater rim where the ice lies hidden is close enough to the sunlit ground beyond it that you could, in principle, walk from one to the other in a single afternoon, a handful of kilometers. No more than a gentle stroll across a familiar neighborhood. And yet at one end of that short walk, the ground can reach heat enough to melt lead, 430 degrees Celsius of relentless daylight beating down with no atmosphere to soften it. At the other end, mere steps away in the crater's own shadow, the temperature never rises above roughly minus 170 degrees, cold enough that water ice sits as stable and undisturbed as it would at the bottom of the coldest ocean trench on Earth. Furnace and freezer, standing side by side, separated not by orbit or season or hemisphere, but by the width of a crater wall. This is the doorstep, made entirely real. No longer only a way of speaking about temperature swings across the whole planet, but an actual place you could point to on a map, where one hand could rest in blistering light, and the other, without moving the body at all, could rest against something that has stayed frozen since before there were oceans on Earth. And there is something almost tender in the thought that this ice has simply waited, undisturbed, needing nothing, asking nothing, kept safe by nothing more than its own stillness in a shadow that geometry happened to carve for it. No one built the freezer door. No one holds it shut. It stays closed because the angle of the axis, that nearly non-existent tilt, and the deep bowl of the crater conspire, without any intention at all, to keep one small patch of a scorched world cool. It is a reminder that shelter does not always need walls or effort. Sometimes it only needs a fold in the landscape, deep enough and shadowed enough to be left alone. From here, it is easy to feel the scale of it all begin to widen, the way a room seems to widen once your eyes adjust to its size. A crater a few kilometers across, holding its pocket of ancient ice. A planet only a little larger than our own moon, small enough that its whole diameter could fit across a fraction of the distance between Earth and its own satellite. And around that small, iron-hearted world, the enormous nearby sun, filling far more of its sky than it ever fills in ours, indifferent to the tiny hollow of cold tucked into one of its own craters. Small crater, smaller planet, unthinkably larger star, each nested inside the next like the layers of a lantern. And you, drifting weightless above all three scales at once, are smaller still. And somehow that smallness is starting to feel less like a fact to fear and more like a place to rest. And so that frozen doorway, tucked into the shadowed floor of a crater that has never once felt daylight, is only a few kilometers from rims where the same small planet is scorched raw by the nearest star in the sky. You can let that distance sit with you for a moment. How strange it is that so much difference, fire on one side and unbroken cold on the other, could fit inside a single short walk. And it is a short walk, on a small world. Let the view widen now, unhurried, the way your own breathing has probably widened without your noticing, and look at Mercury the way you might look at a single stone lying in the grass of somewhere far larger. From where you drift, close enough to the surface that a crater rim could pass beneath you like a shoreline, the sun is not a distant coin the way it is from home. It is enormous. From Mercury, it appears roughly 3 times as wide as it does from Earth, a great pale furnace filling a wide arc of the sky, its light so total that the rock beneath it glows with a heat that could melt certain metals to liquid. And yet, for all that nearness, for all that overwhelming brightness pressing down on one hemisphere while the other keeps its private dark, Mercury itself is small, a little sphere of iron and stone, barely wider than the distance from New York to Perth, laid end to end a few times over, turning its patient rotation while the true immensity, the sun, does almost all of the shining and almost all of the work. The furnace is vast, the doorstep is tiny, and you are held somewhere in between, weightless, unbothered by either. It helps here to let the frame pull back even further, past the furnace itself, because the sun, that wide blinding wall of light that fills a third of Mercury's sky, is not, in the larger accounting of things, anything unusual at all. It is one star, one hushed ordinary star, burning at a size and a temperature that is, among its kind, almost modest. And it is one among hundreds of billions just like it, scattered edge to edge across a single galaxy that is itself one among hundreds of billions of galaxies, each holding its own hundreds of billions of suns, some larger, some smaller, some already gone quiet, some not yet lit. Mercury's sun, the one that turns half of that little planet into an oven and leaves the other half in permanent black, is a single low flame in a house so large that no window anywhere could ever hope to show you all of it at once. You might expect that thought to feel cold. Many people, hearing numbers like that for the first time, brace for something unsettling, the sense of being counted, weighed, and found impossibly small against a scale that does not care whether they are there at all. But let it arrive differently tonight. Let it arrive the way warmth arrives at the end of a long day, when the weight finally leaves your shoulders, because there is, at last, nothing left that needs carrying. Being small, out here, does not mean being forgotten. It means being free of the job of holding anything up. The stars were burning long before you existed, and they will keep their same unhurried burn long after. And nothing in that vast furnace-lit house requires you to tend it, watch it, or keep it standing. You are simply present for a while, a small warm shape drifting past a small stone world, and the whole arrangement continues exactly as it would have anyway. This is, in its own way, the quietest kind of comfort there is. Think of how it feels to fall asleep in a house where someone else is already awake and watching over things. A parent down the hall, a low lamp left on in another room, footsteps you can hear but don't need to answer to. You do not have to stay alert. You do not have to check that the door is locked, because it already is, by someone else's hand. The universe, turning its 100 billion galaxies at its own patient pace, is very much like that other room with the lamp left on. It does not need you awake. It does not need you steering, deciding, managing. It was arranging itself into stars and stone and slow orbits for longer than any measure of years can comfortably hold, and it will keep doing exactly that regardless of whether your eyes are open or closed. Being small inside something that vast is not a diminishment. It is a kind of permission to stop bracing, to let your weight settle fully into whatever is holding you, because whatever is holding you was never depending on you to hold it back. Consider, for a moment, how much labor a person can spend trying to feel important enough to matter to something enormous, as if size were a kind of attention that had to be earned, as if a mountain, or an ocean, or a sky full of suns might otherwise pass you by unnoticed, and somehow think less of you for it. Out here, above a small stone planet with a furnace on one shoulder and starlight on the other, that particular labor simply falls away, because it was never asked for in the first place. The sun does not know your name and does not need to. The 100 billion companion stars scattered past it do not weigh whether you are living a life worth their notice, and in the emptying out of that old effort, something easier moves in to take its place. The plain, unremarkable fact of being here, breathing, held, without having to justify the space you take up. A crater floor a few kilometers wide does not ask to be noticed either, and it has kept its ice safe for billions of years regardless. And Mercury itself, that little scorched and frozen stone turning below you, is proof enough of how well things manage without anyone tending them. No one aims the Terminator as it creeps at walking pace across the equator. No one adjusts the axis to keep those polar craters exactly as dark as they need to be to keep their ancient ice intact. No one stokes the furnace side hotter or coaxes the frozen side any colder. The whole arrangement, the missing blanket of atmosphere, the slow triple-locked spin, the twin extremes standing forever on either side of one thin line, simply continues. The way a held breath continues without thought, the way a held hand continues its gentle pressure without needing to be told to keep holding. You do not have to do anything to keep it running. You never did. The doorstep between the fire and the freezer is not a place you built or a balance you have to maintain. It is simply a place to rest for a while, borrowed and safe, while everything larger than you keeps its own house in order exactly the way it always has. So let yourself rest there a little longer. Let the great pale wall of the sun stay exactly as vast as it is, 3 times as wide as anything you have ever known a star to look, and let it stay entirely unconcerned with you. Let the 100 billion companions scattered out past it stay unconcerned too, each one busy with its own slow burning, its own orbiting worlds, its own quiet arithmetic that has nothing to do with tonight, with this breath, with the small warm weight of your body wherever it happens to be lying right now. None of it is waiting on you. None of it needs you to notice it, understand it, or hold any part of it steady. It was whole before you arrived at this thought, and it will stay whole long after the thought has drifted off somewhere else. And that, more than almost anything else the night sky offers, is the kind of vastness that lets a person finally stop holding on and simply be carried. There is no ledger being kept out here, no tally of how well the fireside is burning compared to the freezer side, no accounting of whether the 59-day spin is on schedule, no one checking that the 1,400-kilometer scar of that ancient basin has finished settling. Every part of this small stone world is simply allowed to be exactly what it already is, unwatched and unjudged, and it manages beautifully. If a planet can hold two impossible extremes at once, fire pressed flush against absolute cold, and still keep turning without strain, without apology, without needing anyone's permission to continue, then perhaps a single small tired body drifting somewhere far below on a much gentler world can also be allowed to simply continue, unremarkable and unwatched, held rather than holding. And Mercury, small as it is against all that hushed immensity, is not only receiving, scorched by a wall of light on one side, frozen under a black and starry ceiling on the other. It turns out this little stone world is not entirely at the mercy of what is done to it from outside. Somewhere beneath that blistered and frost-bitten crust, underneath the crater floors and the ancient lobate cliffs, underneath even the buried ice sitting patient in its permanent shade, there is something else going on, something Mercury is doing entirely on its own. A warmth it did not borrow from the sun at all, kept low and steady in a place no sunlight has ever reached and no shadow has ever needed to protect. And that hidden warmth, once you begin to look for it, turns out to live far below the crater floors and the cliffs and the long twilight band you have been drifting beside. It lives at the very center of the little world, in a heart of iron so large that it changes what Mercury actually is. You might have pictured this planet as a thin shell of rock all the way through, cooling outside, cooling inside, a body with nothing left burning in it, small, old, quietly finished. But picture instead a stone the size of a marble held inside a much larger stone, and let that inner marble grow and grow until it fills almost the whole thing. That is close to the truth of Mercury. Its metal core reaches out to about 85% of the planet's entire radius, only a thin rind of rock, a few 100 kilometers of mantle and crust, wraps around an iron heart wide enough to be, on its own, nearly the size of the moon. No other planet keeps this much of itself as core. Earth, for comparison, carries its iron center within about half its radius, wrapped in a deep, generous mantle. Mercury has almost no mantle left to speak of, mostly core, with the barest shell of stone laid over it, like a coat too small for the body it covers. Rest with that proportion for a moment, because it is strange enough to deserve unhurried attention before it settles into an ordinary fact. Imagine a planet as an egg. Earth's yolk sits well inside the white, cushioned, centered, modest. Mercury's yolk has swollen until the white around it is barely a membrane. A world built almost entirely of its own densest, heaviest material, dressed afterward in only the thinnest possible layer of ordinary rock. And this is not a cold, settled iron ball, either. Not entirely. Long study of the way the planet turns, tiny wobbles in its rotation too small to see with any eye, but patient enough instruments, revealed that part of that vast core is still liquid. Molten iron, generously deep within the doorstep world, moving even now, slow currents of metal turning in the dark at the center of a planet whose surface swings between fire and frost every 176 days. While the crust above endures its long, patient breathing, flexing under noon heat, drawing tight under midnight cold, something warmer and slower stirs far beneath. Undisturbed by any of it, keeping its own separate weather entirely out of reach of the sun. Think of it as a small, faraway lamp left burning in a house whose windows alternate, room by room, between noon and midnight, and no one in either room ever feels the lamp directly, and yet it burns on regardless, keeping the house from ever being entirely without warmth. That moving iron matters more than its mere presence, because moving liquid metal, given the right conditions, can generate a magnetic field, the same principle that keeps Earth wrapped in the invisible envelope which guides compass needles and paints the auroras at our own poles. And Mercury, against most expectation for so small and so slowly turning a world, does exactly this. Spacecraft passing near it have measured a faint magnetic field surrounding the planet, real and structured, tilted only slightly from its spin axis, generated by that same slow churn of molten iron at the center. It measures only about 1% of Earth's field in strength, a hush of magnetism rather than a shout, easily missed, easily doubted before it was confirmed, and yet it is there, faithfully, orbit after orbit. Mercury is, of all the rocky worlds sharing the sun's inner light with Earth, the only other one that has managed to keep a global magnetic field of its own. Not Venus, wrapped in its heavy, restless atmosphere. Not Mars, whose ancient field faded and left the planet exposed long ago. Only Mercury, tiniest of the rocky four, holding on to this one particular kind of interior warmth long after cooling should, by simple expectation, have quieted it. Spacecraft have traced that field's shape the way one might trace a faint outline through fog, an invisible cocoon stretched out on the side facing the sun, swept back into a long tail on the far side by the endless pressure of the solar wind streaming past, a whole private weather of charged particles curling around a planet that otherwise seems to have almost nothing left to protect. It is not a shield in the dramatic sense. It does little to soften the ferocity of noon or the depth of midnight on the ground below. It simply exists, patiently, an unassuming proof that something inside the planet is still awake. Let the fact rest here rather than rushing past it. A small, sun-scorched, ice-holding, breathing with the centuries world still keeps a working magnetic heart. It is easy, drifting above the Terminator as you have been, to imagine Mercury as something almost finished, a place where the only motion left is the crawl of sunlight and shadow across ancient stone. But underneath that patient surface, iron still moves. Warmth still turns over, slow and private, sealed away from both the 430-degree noon and the -180-degree midnight happening just above it. The doorstep, it turns out, has its own hearth burning quietly beneath the floorboards, unbothered by whichever side of the door the visitor happens to be standing on. Naturally enough, a heart this large invites a question, and scientists studying Mercury have carried the same question for decades. How does a planet end up built this way? Nearly all core, almost no mantle. No process that shapes an ordinary rocky world cooling calmly from a cloud of dust and gas, seems to produce a ratio so lopsided on its own. Two gentle possibilities are usually offered, each imagined rather than witnessed, each still being weighed against the evidence Mercury keeps giving up in small pieces. One pictures Mercury, very early in its life, struck by something enormous. Another young world, perhaps close to Mercury's own size, arriving out of the crowded chaos of the solar system's first violent age. Such a collision, immense and one-time, could have blasted away much of Mercury's outer rocky layers, scattering that material back into space or onto other bodies, leaving behind mostly the dense iron core that had already settled at the center, comparatively undamaged by the blow. The other possibility looks not to a single sudden strike, but to the young sun itself, newly formed and unusually active in that era. Its heat and its outward stream of particles fierce enough, this early close to Mercury's orbit, to slowly boil away and strip lighter rocky material from the planet's exterior over a long stretch of time, before the sun settled into the steadier, quieter star it is today. A single dramatic collision, or a long patient stripping by solar heat and wind, either could explain a small planet wearing an oversized iron heart under a stripped thin coat of stone. Perhaps, in the end, some measure of both played a part. The planet itself has not yet said, and may never fully say. Though every mission sent to study, it gathers another small piece of the answer. There is something almost tender in imagining that early violence now, from this safe distance, this many billion years downstream, where all that remains of it is a faint magnetic hum and a proportion worth noticing. Whatever happened in that first age of fire and collision, Mercury absorbed it, settled afterward into its long patient rhythm, and simply kept going. 176 days of light, easing into dark, easing into light again, century after century, while the iron underneath turned over slowly, undisturbed, indifferent to whatever violence had shaped it into being. A wound, if that is even the right word for something so old, healed into a heartbeat. Whichever story turns out to hold more of the truth, the fact underneath it stays the same and stays gentle to hold. Mercury is not merely a place where two temperatures meet and fail to mix. It is a whole world quietly organized around its own contradiction, seared on one side, frozen on the other, and warmed all the way through at the very center by iron that has never entirely gone still. Fire above in sunlight, ice above in shadow, and between them, deep down, this slow molten hum, generous and steady, indifferent to the calendar of day and night passing overhead. The doorstep is not just a threshold between two rooms. Then, it turns out to be a floor with its own furnace beneath it, banked low, keeping its own gentle time regardless of what the sky is doing. And once you sit with the notion of a whole hidden hearth inside so small and so overlooked a world, another question arrives almost on its own, quiet and natural as breath. How exactly did anyone standing on Earth, so very far away, ever come to know any of this about a planet that spends most of its existence lost in the glare of the very star it circles? How does a world that ancient watchers could barely glimpse at dawn and dusk end up mapped crater by crater, its ice found, its iron heart measured, its faint magnetism confirmed? That story, too, unfolds slowly, patiently, across centuries of people standing on their own evening doorsteps, looking toward the small light beside the fire, and that hidden hearth, that small iron sun tucked inside a frozen and burning shell, is not a thing anyone could have simply looked up and seen. It had to be found. It had to be earned, patiently, by generation after generation of people standing on their own doorsteps, at their own dusks, noticing a small light that refused to sit still in the sky. Let the mind drift down now, past the magnetic hum of that inner core, past the scarps and the crater fields, down through billions of years to the first watchers who ever noticed Mercury at all. They did not have spacecraft. They did not even have telescopes. They had only their own evening doorstep, the low western sky just after sunset, or the low eastern sky just before dawn, and a small bright point that appeared for a handful of minutes and then slipped away, chased under the horizon by the very sun it seemed to serve. Because Mercury never wanders far from the sun's glare, it can only ever be glimpsed in that narrow hush of near dark, dusk, or dawn. Never the full black of midnight. Picture those early observers the way you might picture yourself right now, wrapped against the evening cool, one side of the sky still faintly warm with sunset color, the other already deepening toward star dark, and between the two, low on the horizon, this single patient light. For a long while, no one even agreed it was one world. The ancient Greeks, watching it rise before dawn on some mornings and set after dusk on others, gave it two separate names, as if two different lights were taking turns at the same doorstep: Apollo for the light seen at sunrise, Hermes for the one at sunset. It seemed reasonable enough at the time, a light that only ever shows itself in the last minutes before sunrise, and a light that only ever shows itself in the first minutes after sunset, do not, at first glance, feel like they could be the very same object. It took time and careful comparing of notes across many dawns and many dusks before it became clear that these were not two visitors, but one, simply moving through its own private rhythm, appearing now on one side of the sun, now on the other, always hurrying, always brief. Once that was understood, the name settled toward the messenger, Hermes to some, later Mercury to others, a small quick presence darting between night and day, never lingering in either, forever caught, even in its naming, on the doorstep between one state and its opposite. Other early watchers, far from that same Mediterranean sky, arrived at their own version of the same recognition in their own time. Astronomers in old China and Babylon, logging its dawn and dusk appearances on clay and silk, learning its rough rhythm long before anyone could explain what drove it. None of them could have known the fire and freezer truth of the little world they were tracking. They only knew that it was fast, and faint, and shy of full darkness, content to appear only in that soft in-between light that belongs to neither day nor night. And then, for well over 1,000 years after that, Mercury simply kept its secrets. It is the hardest of the classical planets to study. Precisely because of what makes it so remarkable to imagine, it clings so closely to the sun that from Earth it is almost always drowned in daylight or buried in glare, visible only in that thin band of twilight when the sky is neither fully lit nor fully dark. Even after telescopes arrived, astronomers pointing their instruments at Mercury were really pointing them into a kind of permanent squint, trying to make out a small, low, shimmering disk through the thick, turbulent air near the horizon, through the very glow of the sun's own light scattering nearby. For centuries, the best anyone could do was track its comings and goings, time its transits as a dark speck crossing the face of the sun, and guess at what kind of world it might be. Its true spin, the strange unhurried 59-day turning that keeps one slow terminator sweeping endlessly around it, stayed hidden the entire time. Mistaken instead for a locked face like the moon's, one side forever toward the fire, one forever toward the freezer. A tidy but incorrect story, that people believed for a very long time simply because the glare would not let them look closely enough to be told otherwise. The glare finally lost its hold in 1965 when astronomers turned not light but radio waves toward Mercury, bouncing powerful radar pulses off its surface from a giant dish on Earth and listening for the faint returning echo. Radar does not squint the way eyes and ordinary telescopes do. It reaches past the twilight problem entirely, sending its own patient signal out into the glare and waiting, unbothered, for whatever comes back. And what came back rewrote everything. Mercury was not locked at all. It was turning once every 59 days, caught in that quiet 3-2 rhythm with its own year, a clock so unusual that no one had thought to guess it. For a long stretch of scientific history, that mistaken locked face idea had simply been repeated from one generation of astronomers to the next, taken as settled, until this one echo, bounced off ancient rock and caught again on Earth, quietly proved it wrong. It is a gentle thing to consider that the true, slow truth of this world was carried home not on light, but on an echo, a kind of soft returning call across millions of kilometers, confirming that the little light at the doorstep kept a stranger, more patient time than anyone had imagined. From there, the doorstep began, slowly to be crossed. In the mid-1970s, a spacecraft named for a messenger of its own, Mariner 10, became the first human-made object to visit Mercury at all, sweeping past it 3 times across 1974 and 1975, using the planet's own gravity to bend its path back for return after return. It could only see the half of Mercury lit at each flyby, so for decades afterward, humanity possessed detailed maps of less than half a world, a strange kind of knowing, one whole face familiar, its twin left in shadow and guesswork, much like the boundary line between day and night that Mercury itself carries forever around its own equator. It took until the new century and a spacecraft called Messenger for that gap to finally close. Messenger did not simply fly past. It settled into orbit around Mercury in 2011 and stayed there for 4 patient years, circling and circling, letting the slow planet turn beneath it until every crater, every scarp, every stretch of ancient shrunken crust had finally been seen and mapped, dayside and nightside alike. Getting there at all was its own long, unhurried journey, more than 6 years of looping past Earth, past Venus, past Mercury itself several times over, shedding speed with each pass the way the light on the doorstep sheds its heat, a little at a time, until the spacecraft could finally be caught and held in a stable circle around the small world it had come so far to study. It was Messenger's instruments that reached down into those permanently shadowed polar craters and confirmed what radar from Earth had only hinted at years earlier: the frozen water tucked into the coldest, darkest hollows of the hottest, brightest planet. The freezer door beside the fire finally opened just enough to be measured, its edges never disturbed. And even now, the doorstep is still being approached. A newer spacecraft, Bepi Colombo, is out there this very night, tracing a long, careful looping path inward, using flyby after flyby of Mercury itself, of Venus, of Earth, to slowly bleed off speed and let itself be caught unhurriedly by the pull of a world so close to the sun that arriving there gently is its own quiet feat of patience. It will not reach its final orbit for a while yet. It is, in its own way, still standing on the outer edge of the doorstep, easing itself closer, one careful pass at a time, in no rush at all to cross the last of the distance. It is a comforting thing, in the end, to realize how much of what is now known about this small, extreme, doorstep world was gathered not in one triumphant leap, but across thousands of years of ordinary people looking up from ordinary evenings, a watcher on a hillside at dusk, a scholar comparing old notes at dawn, an astronomer squinting through fog and glare, an engineer listening for a returning radio echo, a spacecraft circling patiently overhead. Each of them, in their own time, stood on their own version of tonight's doorstep, feeling the last warmth of a fading day on one side and the first cool hush of night settling on the other, and each of them simply noticed the small light hovering close to the fire, and wondered, and kept watching a little longer than they needed to. That noticing is really all this has ever asked of anyone. Not urgency, not effort, just a willingness to stay a little longer at the doorstep, letting the eyes adjust, letting the small light do what it has always done, rise, hover, and slip quietly away, carrying its furnace day and its frozen night around and around, while far below, the last color drains gently from the sky, and the evening settles lower, and warmer, and softer. The way it is settling now, tonight has been about a small world standing perfectly still on the doorstep between the fire and the freezer, and never once needing to choose a side. Tonight has been about arriving above that little naked planet, closer to the sun than anything else that turns, and finding that closeness alone was never the whole story. Tonight has been about the slowest sunrise there is, a day so unhurried that a single one of its dawns could outlast an entire season back home, and about that long, thin line where light finally leans into shadow, patient beyond anything we usually ask patience to be. Tonight has been about a hidden quiet tucked inside craters that sunlight has never once reached. Ice resting in permanent dark at the top of a world made mostly of fire, and about an iron heart underneath it all, low and steady, unhurried, older than almost anything else you could name. And tonight has been about the patient watchers, the ones who stood on ordinary doorsteps across thousands of years, evenings and mornings alike, simply lifting their eyes toward a small bright wanderer near the horizon, and slowly, gently, coming to know it. None of this needs anything from you tonight. Not one fact, not one region, not one single word has to be kept or carried or remembered. You do not need to know which came first, the fire or the shadowed ice, or hold on to how a world so near the sun can still tuck frost into its own dark corners. You can let the whole night go now, the way you'd let a warm hand slip gently out of yours once you were already sure you were safe. The little world we visited will go on turning its slow turn, whether you remember any of it or not. Faithful and unbothered, long after you've drifted past this thought entirely. Another quiet exploration is already waiting for you, just there on the screen, patient in the dark the way that small world is patient in its own. You don't have to do anything at all. Let it begin on its own, low and steady, while you sink further down than you already are, and let your own attention loosen from it, the way it's already loosening from this. And before you go, here is only a thought to loosen into. Nothing you need to answer, nothing you need to hold on to even for a moment. If you could stand for just one long, slow evening on that small world's frozen night side, and look up at a sky far darker and far fuller than any sky you've ever known, what do you think you would feel first? The cold beneath your feet, or the quiet, or something closer to wonder? There is no answer required. Just let the question sit there beside you, soft and far away, the way a single star sits low over a horizon you're not really looking at anymore. Feel your breath continuing on its own now, slower than it was when we began, needing no attention from you at all. Feel the mattress or the pillow or whatever is holding you a little more fully with every passing minute. Feel your thoughts thinning out, the way mist thins into nothing over still water at the very end of a long evening. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to finish, no part of tonight left unattended to. Everything that mattered has already been carried for you, all the way to here, and it can simply stay carried while you let go of the rest. The small world we visited tonight is still out there, still turning through its long fire and its long shadow, still keeping its quiet, hidden ice tucked away where no light has ever reached. And you don't have to think about it or anything else. One moment longer. Just rest here now, unhurried, held, and warm. Sleep well.